Today, we're jumping into how one American president's foreign policy didn't just define an era. It pretty much kicked off a global showdown that lasted for decades.
So, the world had just clawed its way out of the deadliest war in history. You'd think that would be it, right? Lasting peace? Well, instead, a totally new kind of war, a colder war, popped up almost immediately. So how on earth did that happen? Let's get into it.
All right, to really get the Cold War, you have to picture the world right as World War II is ending. I mean, everything is shattered. The old powers are gone, and in their place, two new giants are left standing, the United States and the Soviet Union. And they had very, very different ideas about what the future should look like.
Now, if you were in Washington, the number one threat was staring you right in the face. Europe was just in ruins, and the Soviet Union was actively pushing its communist ideology into that power vacuum. The big fear was that country after country, weakened and desperate from the war, would just fall under Soviet control.
So, who steps onto this incredibly tense world stage? None other than President Harry S. Truman. He and his team looked at this expanding Soviet influence and knew they needed a plan, a new guiding principle for America. And boy, did they come up with one. It was a strategy that would define the next 40 years.
The word they came up with? Containment. It sounds simple, but the idea behind it was absolutely massive. This meant that the official policy of the U.S. wasn't just about protecting its own backyard anymore. Oh no. It was now about actively stopping an idea, an ideology, from spreading anywhere on the globe.
The best way to think about it is like a firewall, for your computer. The idea wasn't to go in and attack communism where it already was, in the Soviet Union. The goal was to build a powerful barrier, a containment field, to stop that virus of Soviet ideology from infecting other vulnerable countries.
So, okay, it's one thing to have a cool-sounding idea like containment, but how do you actually do it? Well, this wasn't just some vague concept. Truman's strategy was built on three really distinct and powerful pillars. One was economic, one was political, and one was military.
The first pillar started with a really basic truth. When people are desperate and struggling, radical ideas can sound pretty good. So, to fight the appeal of communism in a completely wrecked Europe, the U.S. launched this incredible economic program called the Marshall Plan. And we're not talking about a little bit of cash here. The scale of this was just staggering. We're talking billions and billions of dollars in aid. But let's be clear, this wasn't just charity. It was a strategic investment to rebuild roads, restart factories, and maybe most importantly, to give people hope again.
Right, so here's the key. By helping Western European nations get back on their feet, the U.S. believed it could create stable, prosperous democracies that just wouldn't be interested in what communism was selling. A healthy economy, they figured, was the best firewall you could have.
But this whole idea was about to face a huge, real-world test. The city of Berlin became the flashpoint. See, it was like this little island of democracy deep inside Soviet-controlled East Germany. And in 1948, the Soviets decided to squeeze it, blockading the city and cutting off all supplies by land and water. So what did the Americans do? Did they back down? Start a war? Nope. Truman's response was audacious. He ordered a massive, non-stop airlift to supply the city from the sky. And this wasn't just for a week or two. This thing went on for almost a whole year.
Just try to picture it. It was this incredible display of willpower. Planes were landing every few minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, bringing everything: food, fuel, medicine, you name it. It was this massive logistical achievement and a huge symbolic win that showed the world the U.S. was not going to back down.
That whole crisis in Berlin made one thing crystal clear. Economic help and political promises were great, but they had to be backed up with real military muscle. And that led directly to the third and final pillar of containment, creating a formal military alliance.
This quote really gets to the heart of what that alliance, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, was all about. It established this principle of collective defense. It was a direct message to the Soviet Union. If you attack one of us, you're attacking all of us, and that includes the United States. So this new alliance brought together countries from both sides of the Atlantic, creating this unified military front. And just like that, containment had teeth, real military teeth.
So, after all that, what was the long-term result of Truman's big strategy? Well, you could argue it stopped an all-out war between the superpowers, but it also locked in a brand new global reality.
And this is where you see the real kind of tragic irony of the whole policy. The goal was to protect free nations and create a stable Europe.
But the reality? A continent literally sliced in two. That famous phrase from Winston Churchill, the Iron Curtain, wasn't just a metaphor. It became the hard dividing line between the West and the East.
And nothing, absolutely nothing, symbolized this division more than the Berlin Wall. Even though it was built years after Truman was president, it was the ultimate symbol of the Cold War, a concrete physical scar that showed the world the divide his containment policy tried so hard to manage.
So, to wrap it all up, containment wasn't just one thing. It was this complex, three-part strategy. You had the economic muscle with the Marshall Plan, the political willpower shown in the Berlin airlift, and the military might of NATO. And together, these actions didn't just kick off the Cold War. They basically wrote the playbook for American foreign policy for the next half-century.
Which brings us to a final thought. The Cold War is long over, but this idea of containing the influence of a rival power, using economic pressure, political alliances, and military strength, does any of that sound familiar? It's definitely something to think about, as the echoes of Truman's strategy are still bouncing around our world today.